Okay, let's talk about Midway, especially because this is, I think that it's very inspiring story, always about talking about the unusual hero, that it's always the hero. So for you guys, what is the most important message of this movie? Having always the unusual hero, it's the one that really makes the changes in history. It's not the one that is not in the books, maybe it's not in the, in the history, but it's there. Without those guys, we're nothing.
Yeah, truly. For me, the overriding memory of this is to learn from history. It's to learn from the conflict and the trauma that's been caused by these wars, so that we can not make the same mistakes again. To honor the bravery, the sacrifice of the brave men on all sides, so that we can try to adopt a more global approach to kind of citizenship and a more empathetical, loving view of other nations and otherness in general. I think that we're celebrating these incredible servicemen and servicewomen that did such incredible things to fight for their family and democracy in their country and therefore the world. We're in a different world now. Mm-hmm. There has been a changed version of nationalism and patriotism. It's a beautiful thing for us to be able to tell the story of this in a time of purity and a more simple time. So in these complicated times, we must remember the past so that we can ensure that the future is more peaceful.
Yeah, I think this movie paints heroism, but at the same time, this battle, this war, globally, it was tragedy. Many men lost their lives on both sides, the Japanese side, all around the world. So to Ed's point, yes, we would hope that this reminds people that history does repeat itself and it can repeat itself. So what choices are we making and how do we move forward with peace? And so we don't have to have this happen again and, the next heroes will be other men. But at what cost is that, for just heroicism? No, I think it goes beyond that. We need to live in peace.
It's just like, as you mentioned, to learn from history, but also, of course, not repeating the mistakes or the error, but also finding that the reason why it's always the conflict is always almost the same. It's kind of ambition and fighting for power. And the core that brings those men to the battlefield is the chance of the opportunity to fight for liberty and for the rights and for respect. As simple as having a respect and understanding of both sides. And that's like, if we continue like seeing the story of the war, is like always those both things that are always in conflict, power and love.
You have to protect yourself because there's always going to be someone, there's always going to be the wolf at the door, knocking on the door. So of course you want to be ready to go if you need to go. So you should always be armed. But you said you were from Mexico.
Exactly.
And I grew up in Guadalajara, and I've got 6 brothers and sisters. And our whole family and the culture, the Spanish culture, is all about family and love. And so how do we as a society find that no matter what your culture is, either you're American, Japanese, Chinese, Russian, whatever, it's all about love. So how do we find that medium and we can just have that sense of peace? But of course you have to protect yourself. War, since the beginning of time, has been inevitable. There's always going to be someone searching for power. So I don't have the answers, and I think many people don't have the answers. But it is a discussion, and it is something that needs to be figured out. And I hope one day it will. I don't know. And I think this new generation, it's going to be on them a lot. Our generation as well. But this movie paints heroes, and it paints men who sacrificed not only for just their people, but for the ones they loved. So hopefully we can show that to the younger generations and say, look, yes, we have heroes. Yes, we have safety. Yes, we have protection. But this is also war. And did it need to happen? It didn't need to happen. So how do we move forward? And I hope they get that from this, and I hope they're informed and not naive to that,
And I think that you also mentioned something very important. It's like the new generation, really, the newest generation needs to know the history in order to understand that the liberties and the privileges that we have today, we cannot even make it without those sacrifices. And it's like maybe they are forgetting. We need to revisit the history. That's the reason why we need to talk about those issues again. That's why we need to bring those stories again in order to understand and have like a more wide vision of what's happening today, what can happen in the future. Maybe we can lose that.
100%. You know, it's about being grateful for the relative peace and prosperity that we've been able to enjoy. Of course, everything is not perfect, and, you know, there is, you know, many problems in all of our countries, but not compared to the trauma that was suffered by these generations. You know, my city was bombed during the Blitz. You know, all of these young men, generations of young men going off and losing their lives in Europe and all over the world. And it's tragic. It's tragic, and that trauma is multi-generational, and we must be grateful that we haven't grown up in that, and we must learn from past experiences and mistakes to not fall into the same patterns. But we seem to be so cyclical in our nature as human beings. We seem to fall into the same mistakes, and even in America and Britain, you know, we seem to be at a strange time in some of the decision making and some of the rhetoric that we are hearing. So I think now more than ever, it's important to remember the trauma and conflict of the past so we can try and have a future of empathy and togetherness.